The past always comes back, and for Simon, it returned in a plain manila envelope with just 3 words. You're next. Cedar Falls, Iowa. June 2008. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and forgotten secrets. Simon Vance, a history teacher who cherished order above all else, found his carefully constructed world collapsing when he discovered the unmarked envelope in his mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just the heavy weight of a truth he'd buried 10 years ago. Inside was their graduation photo. 3 smiling faces, his, Vincent's, and Randy's, now violently crossed out with black marker, and those 2 terrifying words that made his blood run cold. Inside there was no letter. Instead, he found a photograph, a faded glossy print from 10 years ago. The high school prom, May 1998. Smiling faces of classmates, awkward updos, rented tuxedos, and homemade dresses. It seemed like an ordinary old photo, except for the thick black X drawn over 3 faces, his own, Vincent Gore's, and Randy Pembroke's. Simon felt something cold and slimy twist in his chest. The same fear that had haunted his nightmares for a decade. His face broke into a cold sweat. The photo slipped from his suddenly weak fingers and fluttered to the floor, treacherously displaying its message. Simon gasped for air like a drowning man breaking the surface. The past, which he had so carefully buried under layers of time and daily routine, was back. It was standing outside his door, waiting like a hungry predator, ready to pounce. Spring 1998. Cedar Falls High School on the outskirts of town. The final bell of the last day of school rang out, sounding especially triumphant. Prom was just days away, and the seniors had already mentally said goodbye to the hallways. A noisy crowd of boys and girls spilled into the corridor, buzzing about after-parties and summer plans. "Hey, Gore, look, your girlfriend's here again." Randy Pembroke chuckled, nodding toward a tall, slender girl emerging from the English classroom. Laura Sparrow walked with her habitual slouch, clutching a worn backpack with a peeling corner. Her faded floral dress had probably been nice once. Her slightly damp brown hair was pulled back with a simple elastic band. She moved along the lockers, avoiding contact with the boisterous crowd. "Hey, walking trash can!" Vincent Gore called out, and the group of guys around him snickered. "You're not actually going to prom in that rag, are you?" Laura kept walking, not raising her eyes. Only a slight tremor in her fingers, gripping the worn strap of her backpack, betrayed her tension. "What? Are you deaf?" Vincent, flexing his impressive biceps, blocked her path. "I'm talking to you, Sparrow." "Leave me alone, Gore," Laura whispered, trying to step around him. Simon Vance watched from the side, leaning against a bank of lockers. His blonde hair fell over his forehead, and his blue eyes were clouded with confusion. He never participated in the bullying, but he never stood up for Laura either. He just watched, and each time he felt a deep, sickening shame. "You thought you'd get away with it?" Vincent sneered. "You screwed up my geometry grade with your little note to Mrs. Gable, and you think I'd forget?" He leaned close to her ear and whispered something. Laura's head snapped up, and for a second, Simon saw her eyes, large, dark brown, filled with such hidden pain, and at the same time an inner strength that it took his breath away. The next moment, she pushed past Vincent and disappeared around the corner. "Why do you even bother with her?" Randy asked, walking up to Vincent. "Forget it?" "No way," Vincent hissed through his teeth. "This quiet little mouse asked for it. Because of her, old lady Gable gave me a D." "Well, You were the one waving your cheat sheet around, Simon blurted out without thinking. Oh, what? You sticking up for your stinky little girlfriend? Vincent instantly turned on him, stepping closer. Or did you forget how your mommy chewed you out in front of the whole school when you lost your lunch money? Simon paled. That incident was his eternal shame. Nadine Vance, a nurse at the county clinic and a single mother, had berated him right there in the hallway, so loudly the whole floor could hear. "Don't you disgrace this family," she'd shouted, waving her arms while he stood there, wishing the linoleum would swallow him whole. "I'm not sticking up for her," Simon muttered, looking away. "Just stating a fact." "All right, guys." Vincent suddenly slapped both of them on the shoulders with the condescension of a pack leader. "I've got an idea. We'll settle the score with Sparrow our own way after the prom. I'll pretend to be friendly, she'll fall for it. And then..." In the next few minutes, Vincent laid out his plan. With every word, a growing unease gripped Simon. What Gore was proposing wasn't a typical high school prank. It was something else, something dark and dangerous. But he didn't dare object. Cowardice and the desperate desire to be accepted were stronger. The next day, as the three of them smoked behind the school's gymnasium, Simon noticed Laura sitting alone on a bench in the far corner of the schoolyard. She was bent over a notebook, sketching quickly with a pencil. Curiosity got the better of him. While Vincent was engrossed in a story about a new video game, Simon quietly slipped away and circled around to look over Laura's shoulder. In the margins of her physics notebook, she was drawing a dress design, an elegant silhouette with off-the-shoulder sleeves, intricate ruffles, and a complex pattern along the hem. The drawing was so detailed, the fabric seemed to ripple in an imaginary breeze. And only then did Simon notice her hands, slender, with long fingers moving across the paper with surprising grace and confidence. At that moment, Laura sensed his presence and turned sharply. Their eyes met. Instead of the fear or anger Simon expected, he saw a flicker of hope. In an instant, her face transformed, and he saw that Laura was beautiful in her own way. Not the flashy beauty of the popular girls, but something hidden like a spring in a deep forest. "You draw really well," Simon mumbled awkwardly. Laura snapped the notebook shut and stood up. "What's it to you?" Her voice was wary. "Go back to your friends. Go have a good laugh with them." She quickly gathered her things and left. Simon stood there for a long time, staring at the empty bench. Vincent's words about what they planned to do to Laura echoed in his ears, and something inside him protested, screamed that this must not happen. But that inner scream was drowned out by another voice, the voice of fear. Fear of ridicule, of loneliness, of becoming an outcast himself. Simon shuddered, jolted back to the reality of 2008. He was standing in the middle of his kitchen, staring at the fallen photograph as if it were a venomous snake. He bent down with difficulty and picked it up. The wall clock, a housewarming gift from his mother, ticked loudly in the thickening silence of the apartment. He turned the photo over and for a moment forgot how to breathe as he read the single line, typed in a stark font. "The first has received his due. You're next." Simon leaned against the wall, feeling his legs give way. His breathing became ragged. Dark spots swam before his eyes. The first? Was that Gore or Pembroke? What did "received his due" mean? He knew the answer. Somewhere deep down, Simon had always known that May evening after the prom would come back for him. For 10 years he had lived, constantly looking over his shoulder, flinching at every unexpected phone call, waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares. And now the past had knocked on his door. The image of Laura Sparrow, her dark eyes full of unspoken pain, surfaced in his memory with a clarity as if he'd seen her yesterday. He didn't even know if she was still alive. And did he want to know? Wasn't it easier to believe she had just disappeared, dissolved like the morning mist? Staggering, he went to the bathroom. His 30-year-old reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, a pale face with stubble, the frightened eyes of a cornered animal. Those eyes belonged to the 18-year-old boy who 10 years ago hadn't found the strength to say no, who had allowed the unthinkable to happen. Mechanically, he stumbled back to the kitchen and collapsed onto a stool. Calling the police was useless. What would he say? "Hello, 10 years ago my friends and I committed a crime, and now someone is threatening me." No. The only thing left was to wait and be afraid. One thought pulsed in his head. You're next. The high school gymnasium had been transformed. Streamers and balloons hung by the diligent PTA tried their best to hide the peeling paint on the walls and the faded curtains on the windows. The muffled lights and music from an old boombox set the scene for a classic late 90s provincial prom. Laura froze at the entrance, clutching a small purse she had sewn herself from fabric scraps. Her throat was tight with excitement. Her mother's parting words still rang in her ears. "Where do you think you're going, all dressed up? Think you're a princess now?" Tamara reeked of cheap whiskey, and Laura was glad her mother had skipped the event, citing a headache. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The simple black dress with off-the-shoulder sleeves, which she had cut and sewn late at night while her mother slept, hugged her slender frame, emphasizing a sudden, unexpected grace. Her hair, usually pulled into a tight ponytail, fell freely down her back in soft waves. She'd washed it with basic soap and rinsed it with chamomile tea made from flowers picked in the vacant lot behind their house. "Is that Sparrow?" A whisper came from the side, and Laura felt her insides clench habitually. She forbade herself to slouch, straightened her shoulders, and walked forward, looking straight ahead. Let tonight, on this last school night, she be who she had always dreamed of being. Not a walking trash can, but simply a girl with a future. "Laura, is that you?" Stacy Morrison, the school's head cheerleader, stared at her with undisguised astonishment. "Wow, where did you get that dress?" "I made it," Laura replied quietly, feeling a strange mix of pride and shame. Stacy snorted incredulously and turned back to her friends, but Laura caught her confused glance. For the first time in all her school years, she had elicited not contempt from her classmates, but surprise. The corners of her mouth crept upward. This fleeting joy was interrupted by the appearance of Vincent Gore. Tall, self-assured, in a stylish suit, a gift from his businessman father, he cut through the crowd with the casual arrogance that comes from a sense of superiority. Laura's breath caught, not from admiration, but from fear. Instinctively, she retreated toward the wall, bracing for the usual taunts. Vincent stopped in front of her, giving her an appraising look. "Well, look at you. You clean up pretty good." Something in his smile made her want to run, but there was nowhere to run. Only a cold wall at her back, and around her, the hostile, curious eyes of her classmates. "Listen, I wanted to apologize," Vincent said unexpectedly, and the room seemed to grow quieter. "You know, for all the stuff. School's over. Why should we be enemies? Let's at least have a normal last night." Laura looked at him, not believing her ears. The same Gore who had made her school years a living hell was suddenly apologizing. Something akin to hope. naive and almost childish, stirred in her chest. What if it was true? What if just once she was accepted? Me and the guys are heading out to the lake after this, Vincent continued, not waiting for her answer. Bonfire, music, come with us. Something flashed in his eyes that made an inner voice scream, "Don't believe him!" But another voice, the voice of a lonely girl who desperately wanted simple human warmth, whispered, "What if? What if this is my chance?" So, Vincent pressed. "All right," Laura said softly, "but not for long." The phone in Simon's apartment rang with a long, desperate tone, but no one picked up. He'd dialed Randy Pembroke's number for the third time, and getting no answer, threw his cell phone onto the couch in despair. The threat from yesterday's mail still sat like a cold weight in his gut. A key turned in the lock. Polly was home. Simon flinched, straightened up guiltily, and tried to arrange his face into a carefree expression. "I bought that cheese you like." Polly's voice, melodious with a slight French accent, came from the hallway. "And a bottle of wine, to celebrate your promotion." She entered the room, a petite, fragile blonde with gray eyes, a French teacher, refined to her fingertips, radiating a sense of homey comfort that Simon had always lacked. How did she end up in this backwater? She'd come fresh out of college on her first teaching assignment and stayed. "I fell in love with the local landscape," she'd say with a smile. Now that smile slowly faded as it met Simon's lost gaze. "What's wrong?" She instantly sensed trouble. "Polly, I need to tell you something." His voice sounded hollow, broken. "I think I'm in trouble." He told her about the strange envelope, the crossed-out photo, the threatening note, but he couldn't. His tongue wouldn't obey. Explain what was behind the threats. 10 years of silence had bound him in chains he couldn't break, even for the woman he loved. "Simon, this is serious." Polly sat down beside him, taking his hand. "You have to go to the police." "No," he answered too sharply, and she recoiled in surprise. "I'm sorry, I just can't." "Why?" Something new appeared in her look. A wariness, like someone suddenly realizing they're living with a stranger. "What are you hiding?" Simon turned away. How could he explain? How could he tell her that the history teacher who taught children about kindness and morality had once committed an unforgivable act? "Please trust me," he whispered. "I'll handle it." Polly looked at him for a long time, then nodded, but her eyes remained guarded. An invisible crack had appeared between them, and Simon realized with horror that this was only the beginning. May 1998. Eagle's Nest, a deserted summer camp outside of town. Vincent's beat-up Ford Bronco, borrowed from his dad, bounced along the potholed forest road. Laura, tossed around in the back seat, clung desperately to the worn upholstery. Next to her sat an unusually quiet Simon. In the passenger seat, Randy Pembroke, already flushed from the beer he'd drunk. "Almost there," Vincent announced cheerfully, steering onto an overgrown clearing. "Behold, our eagle's nest." The abandoned camp was a dismal sight. Sagging wooden cabins with caved-in roofs, a crumbling concrete dance floor, rusted swings creaking in the wind like an old record player. On the main square, you could still make out faded stars painted on the asphalt, and a flagpole leaning precariously to one side, devoid of a flag. "It's kind of creepy here," Laura muttered, climbing out of the car. That means no one will bother us. Vincent winked. Get the stuff, Randy. Randy pulled 2 bottles of cheap whiskey, bags of chips, and a battery-powered boombox from the back. Simon shuffled awkwardly nearby, avoiding Laura's eyes. She suddenly noticed how badly his hands were shaking as he helped spread an old blanket on the ground. They settled on the patch of concrete in front of the former mess hall. Vincent poured whiskey into plastic cups and proposed a toast to freedom from school. Laura didn't want to drink, but she was afraid to refuse, not wanting to spoil the fragile sense of belonging. The liquid burned her throat and took her breath away. Coughing, she felt blood rush to her cheeks and a buzz start in her head. The world around her took on a strange softness, as if all its edges had melted. Simon took an awkward gulp from his cup and coughed too. Vincent laughed. Man, you two are lightweights. Never had a drink before? Half an hour and a couple more shots later, Laura no longer felt her usual anxiety. On the contrary, a strange fearlessness came over her. She even laughed at a stupid story Vincent told about the teachers, and her own laughter sounded foreign to her, clear and free. You know, Sparrow, Vincent said suddenly, and his voice took on a new tone that sent shivers down Laura's spine. We didn't just come out here for fun. We've got a surprise for you. She tried to stand up, but her body wouldn't obey. Her head throbbed, everything swam before her eyes. What did he put in my drink? A panicked thought flashed. You thought you were smarter than everyone, huh? Vincent continued, leaning over her. His face suddenly contorted, becoming mean and alien. Tattling to Mrs. Gable, acting all pure. Everybody knows what your mom is. The town drunk. Shut up, Laura rasped, trying to get up, but her legs buckled. Vincent, that's enough, Simon said hoarsely, also rising on unsteady legs. This isn't funny anymore. Sit down, Simon, Vincent hissed, shoving him hard in the chest. Or do you want to be a loser like your deadbeat dad? Die under a bridge somewhere too? Simon paled. In his alcohol-fogged mind, fragments of thoughts flickered, but the booze and fear paralyzed his will. He saw Vincent grab Laura roughly by the hair, saw her try to break free, saw a heavy-breathing Randy holding her arms. Everything that happened next was seared into his memory in bloody fragments. Laura's scream, which ended so abruptly it was like a string had been cut. The sound of tearing fabric. His own body, betraying him, responding to the violence against everything human in him. The sheer horror in the girl's eyes when she realized that Simon, the one she might have thought was different, would not stop this madness, but would become a part of it. When it was over, Laura managed to break free and ran, stumbling and falling into the darkness. Suddenly, there was a dull thud. She hadn't seen a concrete block from an old foundation in the dark and hit her head hard. Shit! Is she dead? Vincent gasped, running over to the motionless body. Randy, check her! Randy, on trembling legs, approached and bent down. She's breathing, I think, but there's a lot of blood. Let's get out of here, Vincent commanded. Now! You saw nothing, he snarled at Simon. Nothing! Simon stood frozen, staring at Laura's still form in the grass. The alcoholic fog began to clear, giving way to a sobering, gut-wrenching horror. We can't just leave her here, he whispered. She'll die. You want to go to jail? Vincent hissed, grabbing him by the shirt front. I'm dragging you out of here with me, got it? You're not staying. They drove away, leaving Laura in the abandoned camp. The whole way back, Simon was silent, huddled in the back seat. Something inside him had died that night. Something important. Something irretrievable. The TV mumbled in the corner of the living room, broadcasting the evening news. Simon sat staring at the screen with unseeing eyes when a familiar name jerked him out of his stupor. The body of prominent local businessman Vincent Gore was discovered in his office this morning. Sources close to the investigation say Mr. Gore died from multiple traumatic injuries. Police are investigating a possible robbery, as a substantial amount of cash is missing from a safe. The screen showed a modern glass and steel building cordoned off with police tape, then a photo of a smiling Vincent, the same Gore, but in an expensive suit, with the confident gaze of a successful man. The first has received his due. "Oh my God," Simon whispered, feeling a cold sweat trickle down his back. "Awful, isn't it?" Polly said, appearing in the doorway with a cup of tea. "I heard he was from around here. Did you know him?" "We went to school together," Simon forced out. "Sorry, I need to go see Randy. Now." "Now?" Polly asked, confused, but he was already pulling on his jacket. Simon's old Honda Civic weaved through the town's streets. He'd found the address of the auto shop where Randy worked in the phone book. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it would burst from his chest. Motor City Auto Repair was tucked away on the industrial outskirts, a typical garage with a sagging sign. Simon parked and walked into the smoke-filled office, where a weary man in his 50s sat behind a greasy counter. "I'm looking for Randy Pembroke," Simon blurted. "Does he work here?" The man looked up with bleary eyes. "Pembroke? Yeah. They took him to the hospital 3 days ago. Hydraulic lift gave out. Car fell on him. They barely saved him." The ground seemed to drop from under Simon's feet. The second. "Is he? What's his condition?" "Alive. In a coma. They say his spine's crushed. If he lives, he'll be a wheelchair case." "How did it happen? Don't they check those lifts?" The man shrugged, lowering his voice. "Dunno. Thing is, Randy hadn't been himself lately. Jumpy, paranoid, said someone was following him. We thought he was hitting the bottle too hard again. And now, this." At the county hospital reception, they told Simon Randy's condition was critical. Only immediate family was allowed in the ICU. Lamenting the lack of such relatives, the nurse nonetheless allowed Simon to look through the window. Randy's pale, gaunt face resembled a wax mask. Entangled in tubes and wires, he lay motionless. Only the ventilator rhythmically raised and lowered his chest. "Chances are minimal," a passing doctor said quietly. "Severe traumatic brain injury, spinal fracture. Are you family?" "We went to school together," Simon mumbled. The doctor nodded and walked away. Simon remained standing at the glass, looking at the dying accomplice to his long-ago crime and understanding with perfect clarity. He was next. The pine branches scratched against the sky, letting through the timid rays of the rising sun. Old Man Henderson, a retiree who spent his days foraging, walked along a forest path, leaning on a homemade walking stick. The morning was damp and cool, perfect for morels. He didn't notice her at first, a thin figure in a torn dress, lying on the grass near the concrete base of the old flagpole. Coming closer, the old man saw a pale face, dried blood matting the light brown hair. "Lord have mercy," he whispered, crossing himself. The faint, barely visible plume of breath from the girl's lips was the only sign of life. The hospital walls pressed down on Laura like a layer of earth on a crushed worm. White coats, IV drips, the beeping of monitors, the sympathetic looks from the nurses. It all induced a nausea that came in waves. "Concussion," multiple contusions, lacerations. Fragments of medical terms reached her. "Are you going to press charges?" The police officer, a mustached man with a sweaty brow, shifted from foot to foot by her bed. "A thing like this. We gotta catch these bastards." Laura remained silent, staring out the window where the young leaves of poplar trees shimmered in a puddle of blue sky. "Sweetheart," an older nurse said softly after the officer had left, "you have to tell us who did this to you." "No one," Laura replied dully. "I fell." Later, she could never fully explain to herself why she remained silent. Fear? Yes, probably. But shame was even stronger. The feeling that it was her own fault. As always, she just wanted to forget, to cut that night out of her memory, like a surgeon cuts a cancerous tumor from a living body. A month later, the nausea returned. At first, Laura blamed it on the aftermath of the trauma. But when the sickness became constant and her breasts grew tender and heavy, she understood. The body she had tried so hard to forget was reminding her of its existence. "You should terminate," the gynecologist at the county clinic stated matter-of-factly, looking at the skinny, haunted girl in her washed-out dress. "Given the circumstances, I can write a referral." No. For the first time in many weeks, Laura felt something like resolve ignite within her. "I'm keeping the baby." "You're a fool," Tamara exhaled wearily when her daughter told her of the decision. "Who's the father, at least?" Laura didn't answer. She didn't want to explain to her mother something she would never understand. The child growing inside her was the only thing that belonged to her alone. Not to society with its cruel rules, not to the rapists who had shattered her life, but only to her, Laura. And she would decide its fate. "Just like me, huh? A little bastard." Tamara smirked crookedly, pouring cloudy homemade liquor into glasses. Like mother, like daughter. That night, Laura came to a decision that changed everything. She had to leave this house, this town, find a place where no one knew her or her story. A place where she could be simply herself, not the drunk's daughter or the rape victim. The state university greeted Simon with echoing hallways that smelled of fresh paint and chalk. Choosing teaching was a strange choice for a man with his past, but it was desperately logical. He wanted to atone, not consciously, more instinctively, to become someone who helped, not harmed. 4 years of study passed in a fog. Simon studied relentlessly, worked nights as a stock boy to help his mother and little sister. No girls, no friends, no parties. Once, classmates dragged him to a frat party, but the pounding music triggered such a panic attack, he had to flee in shame. After that, they called him the monk, but left him alone. And he was a monk, serving an invisible penance no one knew about. Graduating with honors was his ticket to a new life. When the principal of a high school in a neighboring town offered him a history teacher position, Simon grabbed the chance. Starting with a clean slate was a cliché, but it was the only one he had. He met Polly in the teacher's lounge, a fragile blonde with a French braid. She taught foreign languages and handled rowdy teenagers with a gentle firmness that commanded respect, not rebellion. "You must be the new history teacher?" she'd asked, offering a slender hand. "I'm Polly. Just Polly. Ms. Laurent makes me feel so old." There was something sunny and artless in her smile. She wasn't flirting, just being sincere, alive, real. And Simon, without understanding how, found himself drawn to that light. Their romance developed slowly, as if they were both afraid of scaring off a fragile feeling of rebirth. Evening walks, talks about books, rare chaste kisses. Simon studied her, collecting little details. The way she wrinkled her nose when she laughed, how she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. One night, lying next to Polly in her small apartment, listening to her even breathing, Simon realized she knew nothing about the real him. She once asked about his past, and he lied, mumbling something about an ordinary childhood, a father who died of illness, a mother who worked hard. Not a word about that night, about the animalistic terror in Laura's eyes. He sat up sharply in bed, gasping for air. "What's wrong?" Polly murmured sleepily. "Nothing," he squeezed out. "Bad dream." If only she knew that every night he didn't have bad dreams, but memories. Amelia was born on a cold February morning in 1999, a tiny being with a fuzz of dark hair on her round head and fists clenched as if ready to fight the whole world. Laura looked at her daughter through a veil of tears and whispered, "You are mine, only mine." Leaving Tamara and her drunken rages was easy. Her mother seemed almost relieved. "One less mouth to feed," she muttered, helping Laura pack her meager belongings. Laura found a tiny room on the outskirts of the state capitol through a classified ad. A cramped space with peeling wallpaper, but with a separate entrance and, most importantly, far from the past. Here no one knew her story. Finding work with an infant was nearly impossible. Laura scraped by with odd jobs, cleaning offices, handing out flyers, sewing simple items, pillowcases, aprons, curtains, to order. At night, when Amelia slept, she drew sketches, the same designs that once adorned the margins of her school notebooks. When Amelia turned 1, Laura applied to a community college for fashion design. She studied at night, poring over sketchbooks and textbooks on color theory and costume history until dawn. "You have real talent," her elderly sewing instructor once told her. "But there's so much pain in your style. It can scare clients away." "I don't know any other way," Laura replied honestly. Her graduate collection, Fracture, dresses with asymmetrical lines resembling scars or cracks, yet emphasizing femininity and beauty, caused a minor sensation locally. A small atelier in the city center offered her a job, and for the first time in years, Laura felt the ground firm beneath her feet. Amelia grew into a quiet, serious child with eyes that seemed to see right through you. Sometimes Laura noticed something unsettlingly familiar in her daughter. A gesture, the way she tilted her head, a habit of furrowing her brow when deep in thought. Something that caused a dull ache in her chest, as if an old wound had started bleeding again. It happened on a rainy October evening. Laura was picking up 5-year-old Amelia from kindergarten. On the way out, she bumped into a tall man in an expensive overcoat. Muttering an apology, she tried to slip past, but the man suddenly grabbed her elbow. "Laura! Laura Sparrow!" She looked up and froze. She had only seen this man in newspaper crime section photos, but instinct unmistakably identified her biological father. The same heavy brow, the same set of the shoulders, the same strong jaw. "Paul Sterling," he introduced himself. "I'm your... well, I've been looking for you." "Why? I don't want anything from you." "Is this your daughter?" Sterling's gaze softened as he looked at Amelia. "I live nearby. Perhaps we could talk?" In his elegant, expensively furnished apartment, where every detail screamed of money and power, Laura felt like a stray cat. Amelia, however, calmly sat on the leather sofa, studying the strange man with the directness of a 5-year-old. "I've wanted to meet you for a long time," Sterling said, pouring brandy into crystal glasses. His hands trembled slightly. "Your mother, my mother, whom you raped," Laura said quietly. The glass froze in midair. Sterling swallowed and set it down. "It was different," he said hoarsely. "Really? You hurt her. You broke her life. She didn't want me. I was young, hot-headed, a fool. She drank herself to death because of you, because of what was done to her. And I've been paying for it my whole life." He sank heavily into an armchair. "Money, power, it's all ashes. Loneliness eats away at you until you die. But this isn't about me. I want to help you, and her." He nodded toward Amelia. "You're not strangers to me. But you are a stranger to us." Laura stood up. "Let's go, Amy." "Wait." Sterling jumped up. "You don't understand. I can give you a different life. No more struggling. An apartment, a good school for the girl, a chance to grow your business." "What business?" "I've made inquiries. Your designs, they're good. Think of your daughter, Laura, her future." Laura looked at Amelia in her patched jacket, then at Sterling, not young but still a powerful man with an authoritative air and a barely perceptible plea in his voice. "We'll manage on our own," she said firmly. "We always have." The local Teacher's Gazette was gathering dust on the staff room table. Simon mechanically flipped through the pages, not really reading articles about educational achievements. When he suddenly froze, his eyes locked on a photograph. A young woman with a straight back and a determined gaze stood on a stage holding an award diploma. Her light brown hair was pulled into a severe bun. The caption read, "Laura Sparrow, winner of the State Young Designers Competition, captivated the jury with her Renaissance collection, praised for its bold lines and psychological depth." Simon felt like he was seeing a ghost, the skinny girl secretly drawing in her notebook in the schoolyard. The girl he didn't help. The woman he betrayed. She had survived. Not just survived, she had triumphed, overcome the horror they had inflicted, and achieved success. This knowledge brought both relief and a searing pain. Her life had happened in spite of him. "Simon, are you all right?" Polly entered the staff room. "You look pale." "It's nothing," he forced out. "Just an old acquaintance. In the paper." "What a beautiful woman." Polly leaned over the newspaper. "A designer. And famous, it seems." Simon turned to the window so she wouldn't see his face. Maybe now, knowing Laura was okay, the nightmares would stop. Maybe he could finally forgive himself. But that night, he dreamed again of the abandoned camp, Laura's scream, and her eyes full of despair. Tamara was dying. Her body, wasted by cirrhosis, was wrapped in a thin hospital sheet. Yellow skin stretched over her cheekbones. A cloudy film covered her once beautiful eyes. "Baby girl," she rasped, noticing Laura in the doorway. "You came." Laura sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand, dry, hot, with swollen veins. "How's Amy?" Tamara whispered. "Good. Top of her class. Plays the violin." "And you, your business?" "It's fine, Mom," Laura said softly. "I have my own studio now. Steady work." "Good." Tamara's bloodless lips twitched in a weak smile. "You made it. And I—" She coughed, pink foam appearing on her lips. "Don't talk." Laura carefully wiped her mouth with a tissue. Too late for that. Tamara weakly waved a hand. They give me 2 weeks, Max, but listen. Paul Sterling, he didn't approach you? He did. 5 years ago. I refused. Good. Tamara squeezed her fingers with unexpected strength. He's your father, but a wolf is still a wolf. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I want you to know, I don't regret having you, even from him, even like this. Tears rolled down Tamara's hollow cheeks. I know, Mom. Tamara shuddered as if realizing something. Tell me, baby. She raised herself on an elbow. A feverish light burned in her eyes. I'm dying anyway. Let me go to my grave knowing. Who did that to you? And Laura, looking into her dying mother's eyes, realized she could no longer keep it all inside. She told her about the prom, the abandoned camp, the 3 boys, the night that forever divided her life into before and after. When Laura finished, Tamara was silent for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Then she said, They will answer, all 3 of them. Mom, I don't want revenge. I'm tired. I just want to live. For Amelia. Sterling received a letter from Tamara 3 days after her death. After burying his former lover, he locked himself in his study and pulled out his address book. All these years he'd tried to atone for his old sins, not before a God he cynically called the boss upstairs, but before his own conscience. Now it was time to settle another debt. Find me everything on Vincent Gore, Randy Pembroke, and Simon Vance, he ordered his assistant. Everything, down to what toothpaste they use. He took out a photograph of Laura and little Amelia that he kept hidden in his desk drawer. He looked at it for a long time, until he felt something warm and wet trickle down his cheek. I will fix this, he whispered, running a finger over the faces of his daughter and granddaughter. I promise. The monitor cast a ghostly light on Simon's haggard face. In the silence of the night, only the hum of the computer and the occasional cry of a baby from the next apartment could be heard. His finger hovered over the Enter key. The search engine spat out a link to a small article in a regional newspaper. Tragic accident at abandoned camp. The article was dated June 1998. A local girl, Laura Sparrow, was found unconscious with a head injury. The girl claimed she had fallen. No suspects were identified. Simon read the article again and again, as if hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into a different story. But the words remained the same. Unconscious. Head injury. No suspects. He leaned back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. The past was no longer a ghost. It had become a tangible threat. Vincent was dead. Randy was in a coma, unlikely to survive. The circle was closing. He was next. He opened a new browser tab and typed Laura Sparrow Designer. Her official website opened. A minimalist design, photographs of models in elegant, complex dresses, and a photo of Laura herself. She looked straight into the camera, her gaze calm and confident. There was no trace of the frightened girl from the schoolyard, only a strong, accomplished woman. Simon's eyes fell on the contacts section, an email address. He hesitated for a moment, then opened a new message. Laura, he typed, you probably don't remember me, or maybe you do and would rather forget. My name is Simon Vance. We went to school together. I know I have no right to write to you, but I have to. Something terrible is happening. I think you might be in danger. We all are. I need to talk to you. Please. He paused, his finger hovering over the send button. Was it madness? Was he drawing her into a trap? Or was he trying to save himself? He clicked send. The message disappeared into the digital void. All that was left was to wait. Wait and hope that the past would grant him one last chance. One last chance to finally say the words he should have said 10 years ago in a dark clearing near an abandoned flagpole. The words that had been stuck in his throat, choked by fear and shame. I'm sorry. And so the circle closes. A decade of silence, shattered by a single, chilling message. Simon, paralyzed by fear and guilt, has finally reached out to the woman whose life he helped destroy. But is it a plea for help or the beginning of a confession? Now, the final choice belongs to Laura. Should she answer his message or let the past stay buried? Some would say true justice means making him pay. Others would say her greatest victory is the life she's built since that night. What is the right path? Redemption through forgiveness? Or justice through exposure? There are no easy answers, only choices. Tell us what you would choose in the comments. If this story of guilt and consequence resonated with you, continue the conversation. Hit like, subscribe to the What Happened Then stories, and share your perspective. Your next story awaits.